Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. I am joined by Alan Ng, editor-in-chief of Film Threat and one of the co-hosts of one of my favorite shows on YouTube called Hollywood on the Rocks. Alan, how are you?
Hey, very good. Hey, thanks, Sean, for inviting me.
Dude, it's an honor just to have you here, man. You have a great track record, but first off, how's your day going? How's the week going? You said it's busy.
Yeah, it's busy. It's award seasons. Chris and I, we both belong to the Critics' Choice Association.
Right.
So all the studios are just trying to get us out to all the screenings, especially to kind of hit the deadline. Since a lot of these movies won't come out until like Christmas, so we're getting some early screenings.
Yeah, I saw a couple of posts you had on Instagram, which if you want to follow Alan, you can follow him on Instagram at mypal and on Twitter at Alan Ng, right?
Yeah. Twitter is my pal Al.
mypal.
Yeah, and then Film Threat Alan on Instagram.
And I'll have that listed right below. But you saw Babylon, right?
Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah. It's a very long movie. It's 3 hours long. And
before you go ahead, I want to have a subtopic to come back to this real quick, because yesterday on Film Threat and Hollywood on the Rocks, you discussed how movies are a bit long these days. So I want to keep that in mind and come back to that point. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
3 hours?
Yeah, 3 hours. And it's one of those movies where, it's Damien Chazelle, so Whiplash, La La Land, at least those are ones I'm familiar with. And now this one. This is his much darker movie. It sort of takes place at that transition from silent films to talking films, and apparently at that time there's a lot of hedonism going on in Hollywood, where it was just parties after parties, drinking, drugs, sex, and he wanted to kind of capture that.
Has anything really changed in Hollywood though?
Yeah. Well, I think it's when you watch the movie, you see kind of the height of the hedonism, where it was cool, it was fun, you got all your personal needs taken care of, and then over time you see kind of the degradation of this lifestyle into, you kind of see this whole atmosphere at its lowest by the end of the film, and but the thing is like, it's 3 hours long. It just, and one of the mistakes you can make in film is to be predictable, and for a 3 hour movie, if you kind of know where things are headed, it should be no secret that when you live this kind of lifestyle, life doesn't get better.
Did you figure out the plot pretty quickly into the movie?
Yeah. And you kind of know where the characters are going. You ultimately know where, because we've seen this played out before. But I will say there are some really spectacular moments, hilarious moments, really creepy, weird moments. So the movie, for 3 hours, it has like maybe 5 or 6 really tentpole moments that are worth watching.
You don't do bathroom breaks, right?
I don't do bathroom breaks.
Okay.
No, I haven't. Yeah, I'm that person that has to see that.
Because I mean, to give people a little bit of a background, I mean, you go to these premieres like pretty early as far as the average viewer. And something I respect about you and how you approach your analysis of these films, and anyone who's listening for the first time to Alan, it's like he doesn't just do superhero comic books. Film Threat is about the indie films. They watch everything. You can even submit your own film to them. So, Alan, when you're going into a movie like Babylon or any film in particular, and it's going to be 3 hours regardless if it's an hour and a half, what's your approach? Like, what are you going in there? Like, seriously, like, this is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to know anything about a movie before going in, and so I tend to try to know as little as possible, and so I'm not quite. I intentionally don't tune into a lot of the chatter and talk, especially when it comes to the big studio, the Marvel and the Star Wars and stuff. I feel like it's the fairest way to do this. And again, everyone has their own approach to films. I want to really try to judge what's thrown up on the screen as much as possible without bringing in a lot of baggage. And so for Babylon, I didn't know it was 3 hours long until we hit the hour and a half point and realized, oh, this movie's going to go on for a very long time. Yeah, and you know, I'm at that age where if I if I go to the if I relieve myself, empty myself out before a movie, I'm good. And so, you know, I kind of plan it that way.
Okay. And since we did mention, this is comic construct, so we focus, on films as well. And but we kind of have a, saturation of superhero films, and
Mhm.
that's just kind of taken over the market. My friend Jason Elliott, who's also the co-host, wanted me to ask you something. He wanted
Yeah.
to is there a fatigue with superhero films, whether they're good or bad?
You know, I have to believe that, you know, I can't believe that there's a fatigue of a fatigue involved in watching good movies.
That's what you
You
said
know,
on filter, and that's yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, you know, if you know, up until Avengers Endgame, I mean, were you feeling fatigue? You know, did you still want more after it? You know, I would submit that you know, and you know, I think we were pretty anxious the fact that Marvel was only putting out, you know, 2 movies a year, and I think by the time Endgame came along, they upped to 3. And so, you
Yeah.
know, again, it's like, you know,
That's a great
uh,
point. You don't
yeah.
get tired of good movies regardless of the genre. I mean,
Mhm.
I think that's a fair statement, and, I think people these days, especially on YouTube, I mean, it's easy for everyone to have an opinion, and I think that's great. But what I also like, you observe it from an objective point of view. You don't go in with anyone's opinions. You
Mhm.
kinda always have that balanced take and look on it. So,
Yeah.
it took you like, I have one of your, posts on Instagram. It was that final episode of, I believe, She-Hulk, and you said, "I gave it a chance, but ultimately, wasn't for me,"
Yeah.
basically. So, when you when someone like you gives the time, like, and you give yourself in a period of, let it marinate in my brain. I don't think people see that enough from people reviewing and, analyzing these shows and movies. What what I know we just kinda hit on it, but why do you take that approach? Do you think it's fair for the filmmakers? Do you think it's fair for the actual actors? Is it just the way you've always looked at movies and TV?
Yeah. I mean, I I think I want to believe that people deep down want to produce good work, you know, and I have to. And again, you know, this is me and this is my personal viewpoint, but you know, I kind of have to honor that. But at the same time, you know, there are trends. You know, there are bad directors who consistently produce bad films, and so you do bring a little bit of that bias in. You know, I think, you know, talk about fatigue. You know, Marvel is getting in that point where before they were putting out great stuff and now they're putting out mediocre stuff, and if not worse. And you know, and you know, and I think as an industry as well, you know, I don't know if this is another topic you want to talk about, but the quality of filmmaking nowadays, the quality of storytelling has gone down, and I think people have forgotten, you know, how to tell a good story, or have forgotten why the classic films that we watch year after year after year, you know, we forgot why we watch those things year after year, and we don't replicate that, you know, and almost to a point where I think Hollywood is somewhat arrogant in the idea that they, you know, they think that there's a new way to tell stories, and that new way is not a new way; it's the old way, and it's the bad way. But you know, and I
What's
don't know if
ca
you want to,
what's
yeah,
causing that? What's causing? Because that's a beautiful point.
because I think
It has to be a
maybe
mental
they're not
thing.
being taught this stuff. I mean, you know, people would look at Tarantino. I mean, he was a student of film. He was a student of movies, and he took,
Right.
you know, he watched enough to understand what is a good story. And
He
I don't
said
think people
something
do that.
recently. He said something, about films in the '80s or '50s. I have to pull up the quote, but,
Mhm.
sorry, you said go ahead with the Tarantino, 'cause
Oh yeah,
he
no, it's just he, you know, he's a student of it, and in being a student of it means that you find what works, what intrigues you as an audience, and then in your own works you replicate it into your own films. You know, I'm not exactly the biggest Tarantino fan, but I recognize the fact that he tells good stories.
you respect the way he approaches the
Mhm.
process.
Yeah, and I wish everyone wish everyone respected the process as he does. It's
Uh,
this idea of seeking excellence in everything you do.
Is that alive with like how, your partner Chris Gore would say factory filmmaking is alive
Mhm.
and right now? Is that taken over the old way of doing things?
Yeah, if they're it's so much easier to make a film, make content. And I think we've gotten into this idea that we have to make content and we have to keep pushing out content. And when you're pushing out so much, you're not able to pay attention to that. Yeah,
I
you
mean,
know,
3-hour movies, for instance, how are you supposed to keep the audience engaged with it when everyone has the attention span of their phone?
yeah. Well, it's not impossible. I mean, Titanic. I mean, that's a movie that
That's a
goes
good
on a very long time and it ran in theaters. It ran in theaters well beyond its Oscar win.
and then
And people,
COVID
yeah.
hit when Tenet released. I mean, I love Tenet after I watched the 5th time and finally understood what was going on. But I appreciate the length of that film. But for instance, I asked this on your show, Hollywood on the Rocks, with Film Threat. The Batman, you could have cut 20 minutes out of that, for instance.
Yeah, that movie should have ended when they caught up with the penguin at that
And
diner.
you always bring up a good point with you could tell a movie was filmed during COVID. And I
Hmm.
always noticed that too. And I noticed it with Wakanda Forever. You can notice it with parts of the Batman. Uh, does it really have that much of an impact when you have to stand 6 feet apart from everybody, or is that just one excuse to a bad movie?
Yeah, I'll say this. It's this idea of cognitive dissonance. When you see something that looks off, your brain tells you something's wrong. And when something doesn't look normal, and feel that it's not normal. And so when you see the way people stand in what should be a crowd,
Yeah,
when you see a film where there's a big set with 3 people in it, your brain just tells you there's something wrong here. And what that does is it pulls you out of the movie. So rather than being engaged in the story, you're wondering, well, why am I feeling something wrong? It's not that they couldn't have done a better job of covering up the COVID restrictions, but when something looks off and your brain just kind of pulls you out at that moment. And that's the worst thing you can do in a movie, is to have your audience disengage from your story for some stupid reason.
that's a great point. And the average viewer won't notice it, but when
Mhm.
someone like you or someone that notices points it out, it's hard not to.
Yeah.
And it's not just
Well,
with
it's it,
COVID restriction. It happens with other like things in movies or film.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I think I experienced this with Babylon. I just kept thinking to myself, I really should be enjoying this movie, but I'm not. And I don't really understand at this moment why I don't. And after, it's like, even Wakanda Forever, after that first battle, after the UN scene, I
Yeah.
was bought into the movie up until that point.
And you didn't
And then
mind the fact
afterwards,
you didn't mind the fact they didn't recast T'Challa. You thought it wasn't a bad
no,
move at all. So
yeah.
putting that out there for everyone, he's not hating because they didn't recast it. They did not recast T'Challa. Yeah.
Yeah. But after that, it was just like, I'm not feeling this movie. I'm not connected with this movie. And that's the thing I try to wrestle with, is, well, why am I not? Because fundamentally what's thrown up on the screen, I should be having a good time, but I'm not. And that's kind of that's the approach I generally take with a movie, is, okay, if I'm not feeling this movie, I need to figure out why I'm not feeling it.
So with Wakanda Forever, how did you break that one down?
How to break the other one down? It was, yeah, I mean, a lot of it did have to do with the feel of the movie. It didn't feel like a Marvel movie. And then I realized, oh, this is during COVID. And that's when you start noticing why scenes don't fill up well, in terms of, yeah, I think the biggest thing is, in the first Black Panther, you were in this royal, majestic world of Wakanda, and they didn't reproduce that in this movie. It felt smaller. It felt like you were on a
It did
set.
feel smaller, especially that
Mhm.
scene when Namor came out of the water. I feel
Yeah,
like you could tell the green screen was back there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And and I wasn't bothered by the green screen. You realize that, but it's you know there were a lot of things going on. One of the things, and I don't know if you noticed it, but the movie was shot pretty much exclusively with handheld cameras. And so that gave it a different feel in terms of how they moved around, the fact that shots weren't really locked in, and then I started noticing, it was shot almost as if it was on film, where you have sharp images. I didn't feel a crispness that you normally associate with Marvel films.
What was Ryan Coogler's decision on that? Why do you make that choice? Was it to like feel fluid with the Black Panther or something?
Yeah, you know what I think it is. I think he was forced into making this movie,
Ooh.
and then have two complications: Chadwick dying, and then COVID. And I think he did the best he could, and then you realize he was restricted in many ways. And it's a
They got to
shame.
work with what they got. It's their job at the end of the day, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I
But
mean, we talked about yesterday about the original story,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it was like, yeah, I mean, one thing about stories, you've got to find some interesting hook that separates your story from every other story like it, and this idea that you know to me, the story here was, was it Co-
Kukulkan.
Telecon,
Telecon. Is that
name was like that they were a credible threat against Wakanda, and that they were gonna stay hidden and use Wakanda as kind of the go between, the buffer between, this land in between, the war between, I'll just call it Atlantis and
Yeah,
surface world.
and then they wanted to team up with Wakanda, which a lot of people that I've been reading articles on online, they say it wasn't a big ask of Namor to ask for their help,
Mhm.
especially after the UN scene. But uh, I think it wasn't fluid at all the whole film, and I think
Yeah.
the first one was good. I think the second one, they tried. I think I compare it to having like, a football team.
Mhm.
You lose your star quarterback, unfortunately, and you go
Yeah.
with the surrounding supporting players, and you can make there can be good moments, good feelings. I think
Mhm.
they did bank on the unfortunate passing of Chadwick a little bit, not
Yeah.
in a selfish way. I don't think it was a selfish way, but I don't think like Shuri became the Black Panther in time. It was a little too
Mhm.
late. If it was her story, beautiful. Let's get there though.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, that Wakanda Forever should have been Shuri's story. It should have been. This movie is all about Shuri becoming Black Panther. Um, but they didn't get to that really until halfway through the movie, where, when and I think it was also a big mistake killing off Queen Ramonda. Sorry to spoil it for everyone. Um,
I'll put spoilers, don't worry.
yeah.
But I
Excuse
feel
me.
like I was thinking about that when y'all were talking about it on Hollywood on the Rocks the other day, but I feel like that was the equivalent of when T'Challa lost his father in Civil War. That
Mhm.
was supposed to be that moment. I don't think it landed. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the death landed, but it was,
To
to me,
motivate
it
the character.
to me it ruined. There was potential of, let's just say it all worked out. Shuri becomes Black Panther. To have her mother there to kind of be her mentor,
Yeah.
in the next movie, there's a lot of story potential with that here is, because Shuri is essentially, she's the atheist of the family. She's also the one who least wanted to be leader. And so there's,
She
in
was
terms of
smart.
being a leader, she doesn't have the skills, she hadn't had the training of leadership. And to now have her mother try to pass that on in the next and subsequent movies, to me, is interesting storytelling.
Well, this
um,
is
but
a good
now but she
segue.
doesn't have that.
You said leadership, and this is a good segue into another topic.
Mhm.
So that Wakanda Forever was the last Phase 4 of the Marvel Phase 4, correct?
Yeah,
And the first movie, I believe, was Black Widow, right? I
I
think.
believe so.
So
Yeah, I think Spider-Man was the last of
and then
phase 3. Yeah.
Phase 5's coming. There's some good stuff coming out, and then Phase 6 is, I think, where Marvel's really banking on what they're really banking on. They got Deadpool 3, they got
Yeah.
Fantastic Four, which you are a little worried about, if I, and then they
Yeah.
got the Avengers movies coming out. Do you
Yeah. I mean,
think?
I'll just say phase 6, the way they're presenting it is it's the culmination of the Kang story. So Kang is basically going to take over for Thanos in terms of the big bad villain. And so phase 5 will lead up to that. We'll introduce Kang as the villain, and then phase 6 will be, the final battle.
And do you think with the incorporation of the Disney Plus shows, I mean, you made a comment earlier on Wakanda, how, the city looks smaller. It just didn't look as good as number one. Do you think they're trying to equal it out with the TV shows? Because She-Hulk's CGI was kind of horrendous, but I guess
Mhm.
that they went for after a while.
Yeah.
But I mean, is it just me? Is it just us that are noticing the drop off there?
Yeah. I mean, again, if these shows were better, I don't think we'd be talking about this. It was like,
Yeah,
okay, can't
I
wait for
guess.
the next one.
So
There seems to be
does it
I think leadership at Disney is misguided at this point in terms of what they're going for.
isn't Kevin Feige in charge of it, or is it not in his
Yeah,
control?
Kevin Feige's in charge. Technically, he's in charge,
Okay.
but the strategy is all wrong. I think a lot of what's going on should be about subverting or managing expectations. I mean, Ms. Marvel is, for all intent and purpose, it's a teen girls Disney Channel show. But the
I
thing is, there's nothing wrong with that.
no.
Absolutely nothing wrong.
I
And there's
watched
nothing
it.
wrong with the fact that she's Muslim and that you're introducing Muslim culture.
I don't know.
But you can't expect grown adult men to fall in love with Ms. Marvel at that point. You can't go after the fans saying, well, you're racist because you don't like this show. Just freely admit the show is not meant for, adult men who are, this show is for teen girls, and
Maybe even younger, you know?
yeah, and just admit it and say, we're going to make these TV shows and we're going to have different audiences for each of the shows, and which is a perfectly fine strategy,
But
but
how would you tweak it? How would you, if it was up to you, would you make sure the audience knew that, or just approach each show in your own way? I mean, what would you do
yeah,
differently?
well, how I would tweak it is, you find out where your money comes from. You find out who is paying for your service, who will potentially pay for your service, and you cater them. This is basic marketing. This is basic business 101.
Yeah, you gotta
You
back them.
can't,
You gotta back
yeah,
them for that.
yeah, you can't make a product that people don't buy, and you know, eh, this is all business. There's a need out there, and you fulfill that need. And when you fulfill that need, people will spend their money and want more. And and I think Disney, I think Hollywood in general has fallen in that trap of, look, we'll just slap Marvel on it and people will come, assuming that that we as fans will come out. I've been a big Disney fan from childhood.
Right.
I watched everything Disney, went to all the Disney movies, went to the theme park, went to Disneyland constantly.
Mm.
And there was a time where if Disney put it out, I'd go see it. I'd go do it no matter what, because it had Disney on it. But then you start to realize that they don't necessarily care about us anymore. And then it begins to show.
Was there a shift when that took place? Because when I was a kid, I loved Disney. I preferred Disney World to
Mhm.
Disneyland over Universal Studios, you know?
Yeah.
So there had to be a transition to where all this has started to happen like that.
Well, honestly, with Disney specifically, it's happened several times.
Okay.
There was in the early 80s, Disney was was in really bad shape, to the point where they were going to shut down animation completely and just produce live action. And that's when Michael Eisner came in and just revolutionized Disney entertainment. But over time, Eisner was more concerned about his stock valuations, the stock he owned, and how much, he began to protect himself. And that's when you started seeing qualities at the theme parks and movies decline. And to the point, and then he started getting backlash from Roy Disney Jr., Roy O. Disney, to the point where Eisner fired him off the board. And then Roy came in and, basically went through this entire process to save Disney, which led to the hiring of Bob Iger as the new CEO. And that was a great move.
Right.
Although you can question it now, at that time, that pretty much saved Disney. That's when Disney bought Marvel. That's when they returned back to hand-drawn animation. That's when they bought Pixar. It was, there were a lot of smart moves being made. And then now they've now that they've had all this success, they're losing focus as to what worked. And that's where we're at now with Disney.
And with DC and WB going through that transition, and hopefully, they're getting things right. I mean, I even asked a question on the show a couple weeks back on Hollywood on the Rocks that you and Chris do, that if Ben Affleck comes back, does that mean that that's the end, for the Batman with Matt Reeves?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm with you when you said, I want to see more of the Matt Reeves universe, but
Mm-hmm.
is it totally dependent on how if DC steps their game up, is it going to hold Marvel and Disney more accountable, or does that not?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're seeing it now. I think reports are that Universal is now starting to take over in terms of finding dominance, or finding a foothold against Disney in the theme park business.
Well, there's a reason Christopher Nolan went there, I guess. He went
Yeah.
from UB to Universal.
Yeah. I mean, Disney was, well, I think a lot of Christopher Nolan's decisions was a lack of trust in the leadership at Warner Brothers, which ultimately led to Warner Brothers getting bought out. And where they are now. And it all goes again back to money. How can you run a business that doesn't make money?
Yeah.
And how can you be so arrogant to think that what the fans want doesn't matter?
Yeah, and that's something that I think Marvel, like you were saying, when they first were starting this beautiful, intro into Iron Man, to all these superheroes, they were listening to the fans. I think I even heard on Howard Stern that they, on the first Iron Man, they didn't really have a script. They just kind of got in the room together, and then they would figure out the scene together, and then they would see what the fans kind of wanted, Jon Favreau.
Yeah.
And now you see in She-Hulk, the final episode, all these guys hating on a girl. I mean, that's not reality. Do they know that? Do they know guys generally like women generally like guys? I mean, are they just disconnected, or is it just that much of an agenda they have to push, or is it just too many ideas?
I think it is. I think it's more agenda than anything. The word going around at Disney when they bought Marvel was, Disney had the market on young girls in terms of Disney princesses, toys, merchandising. And in order to expand on that, they bought Marvel because that appealed to boys. And so now you have Disney princesses, your hot market for girls, Marvel, your hot market for boys. That's money. And I think with the current political climate, this idea that, oh, this is for boys, is misogynistic. And so we need to, who says that superheroes can't be for girls? And it's not that girls weren't watching and reading and buying this stuff, but it was, the business decisions, creative decisions were toward, traditional, what boys liked. And
there weren't many girls back in the day building the Millennium Falcon with Legos, for instance.
Yeah, and to blame Hollywood, to call them, why are you only making toys for boys and not for girls? Well, ultimately you have to let's put it this way. You know, the whole Lightyear thing with the gay kiss,
Yeah.
personally had no problem with it. But the thing was is that that moment was put there in order to say, hey, we're going to you know, reach out to the LGBT community, and here's our way to do it, to say that you're inclusive. Oh, let me just finish. And the problem was is not only did you turn off the existing fans, but the people you wanted to bring into the fold because of that scene didn't show up. And so now you've lost on both ends. You lost your fan base, and you never brought in the people you were hoping to bring in by doing that.
So when they see that and they didn't get the people they wanted to come in, do they not adapt? It's because they did the same
They
thing in
blame they
right?
blame homophobia for it, and they continue to make the same mistake.
That's not gonna fly too much longer because
Yeah.
people are not gonna watch these shows. They're not gonna watch the movies. I mean, you saw the
Hmm.
same thing in the Rise of the I think it was the Rise of Skywalker, the last of the trilogy, where there was that kiss at the very end between the
Hmm.
ladies. But I don't think anyone has a problem with it. But who were those characters? No one really
Yeah.
knew. It just seemed kind of agenda-ish.
Yeah, and I mentioned it before. The straight people weren't kissing. You
Yeah,
know,
I mean, I don't think anybody has a problem with anybody kissing as long as it has to do with the plot and the story. And
yeah. If there's real context, if
in a
if
film,
people are kissing, because they won and that this was the way they could express themselves, fine. But it didn't seem, it seemed like it was trying to make a point as opposed to trying um, to show what would naturally happen when you destroy the Death Star.
yeah, and it was honestly very awkward kiss. It was just like, oh, we're up. It was just it wasn't fluid. It didn't work for me. If we knew the like backstory of the characters, because with film, basically you have a beginning, middle, and end. When if show an object, there's like rules to film and cinema.
Hmm.
So I feel like they kind of break those rules to push those agendas, and that's when it really irritates me because like you, I appreciate good structure. I appreciate when things are done a certain way because that's how film is. There's certain things that need to make sense in order for the characters to be, you know, followed by the audience. And
Hmm.
that's what you were saying earlier about, movies that kind of change that way, change from that old school filmmaking mode into now it's whatever they need to push it. And do you see this not just with superhero movies and comic book movies, but do you see this with just regular film?
I'm sorry, which part?
You see the
The
woke
whole agenda thing.
Yeah, yeah, because in indie films back in the day, that's where you could really push the edge. That's where you can kind of the raw, the real. Is it changing there too in that world?
I would say this in terms of original work, it exists because it's natural to it. I think when you have the gay kiss in a Disney film, it just feels like it's inserted in there to basically have everything we produce now has to have some form of gay content. That just that doesn't make sense other than you're trying to make a point. Um, in terms of for example, Glass Onion, find out Benoit Blanc is gay. Well, okay. I mean, that's Ryan Johnson's character. It's he's the main character. It's germane to, he may not. I mean, this is the stupid thing. He's not doing gay stuff in the movie, um, but what is gay stuff? But that was the design of the character. If Dumbledore is gay, well, at least J.K. Rowling, that was her intention, and so it wasn't inserted because someone said, hey, you need so much gay content in your work. That's just kind of how she felt about that character and made it the way they wanted. Same
Yeah,
goes with race.
race, and even if you happen, just to be straight, it's just like,
Mhm,
yeah, I have a wife, I'm straight. You're not screaming it within the character of the film unless you're
mhm.
crazy or egotistical. And then the race diversity is a beautiful thing, but do you think that gets overplayed sometimes when it's not necessary. Like I love seeing different ethnicities, different
Mhm.
genders get opportunities in movies. I'm Persian, I would love,
Yeah,
for more opportunities to happen, as an actor or a two-time failed actor as
yeah,
myself. I don't hate when I see a good film.
yeah,
I appreciate every actor or actress, and you know,
yeah. And you'll never hear me say, "Boy, I wish there was more white people in that movie." Yeah, it's because this was me growing up all this time. I never saw Asians in my American entertainment, which was most of what I saw. You know,
you're starting to
I've
see
been called out on this because they'll talk about Bruce Lee and things like that, but it's like, okay, yeah, that was specifically, but in terms of having an Asian,
Marlon
lead a
Brando.
movie, have a significance, so anytime we saw an Asian, me and my friends, it was like, hey, there you go, one of the brothers have made it, one of the sisters made it, and
Who are some top Asian actors right now?
Tomlin's. Well, you could it the joke is that there's the Asian. So I think not Dennis Park, Randall Park is one. Ken Jeong. Um, Michelle Yeoh definitely has the gravitas where she's being used more in roles that aren't specifically Asian. And so
The reason
you
I
know,
asked that, Alan, is because you just went to the Asian Pacific Cinema and Television Awards.
yeah,
So how was that, and what kind of experience was that like?
yeah, it's to me, I I embrace diversity, and I think I'm realizing that maybe my viewpoint is may be in the minority, pun not intended, because I grew up in LA, and
It's a melting pot.
when I grew up, um, yeah, I'll admit it was mostly white, but I started seeing more Asians coming in. Certainly, there's a great Black population, Latino population, and as opportunities presented themselves, and people of color were able to find managerial positions, higher positions, you start seeing more of a diversity, and so that's normal. Um, but what was the original question?
Oh, there's just the experience at the Asian Pacific.
Oh yeah,
I believe you went with your
yeah.
daughter.
So yeah,
And just real quick on Film Threat, if you're a member of Hollywood on the Rocks, you can get the members only videos of I think Miss Marvel got an award video. There's
yeah.
a lot of good stuff. So if people want to join the page, but how was that experience?
It was actually great. It's kind of nice to see how far we've come. Um, because there wasn't a lot of stuff for us. There wasn't a lot of and Hollywood never really got it right. If you've seen Pat Morita's documentary,
What's that? Like the
Mr. Miyagi.
is it like the history of Asian acting in films or something?
Well, it was the history of Pat Morita.
Okay.
Because he was Arnold on Happy Days,
Oh,
and his character blew up. People loved Arnold, and so ABC decided, well, let's pull him out of Happy Days, give him his own TV show, and the TV show flopped hard, and then Pat Morita was never allowed to go back to Happy Days, and and the point there is that Hollywood's never gotten Asian stories right, and it hasn't been until recently that they're starting to understand that we're a lot more diverse within our community, and our experiences are very specific, which is
yeah.
partly why I think I appreciated Shang-Chi a whole lot more than everyone else did.
No, dude, I agree with you. Like I was hesitant on Shang-Chi, and then I watched it and I was like, okay, this is good.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, that's
and
why I take your advice, don't let anyone influence your perception of
mhm,
a movie until you actually go see it.
yeah. I mean, Shang-Chi was,
And
having grown up Chinese and in Chinatown,
Alley and
and
all.
yeah, it's like, wow, this, and it takes place partially in San Francisco. It's like, this all feels very familiar. I understand what's going on. I understand the family dynamics. I understand all these creatures that are now brought to life, because these were creatures that that we had run into in our at banquets, at formal Chinese events,
Yeah.
the dragon dances and all that stuff. you know, very familiar, and I think they nailed culture right, you know, which is different than what happened with Nimore.
I'm asking, we'll get to that. I'm asking this like honestly, like if it were me and I was watching all that take place like you did, I'd get kind of like happy emotional about it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
hell, like that's what's up. You
Well,
know?
if you know, you said you're Persian. I mean, did you resonate a little bit? Did you watch Ms. Marvel and did you resonate a little bit with what was going on?
No, you know, Miss Marvel is just out of my age range. I think the actress that
Mhm.
played her, you know, I really respect the hell out of her, you know, for being able to do that. I just don't think uh, you know, I feel like when they make comic books, they don't give them enough time to marinate with the readers yet.
Mhm.
And then they changed her powers, and then I think they played into the Muslim thing, which, you know, people in the Middle East, like especially in Iran, as you see right now,
Mhm.
religion is what's causing all this havoc.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they did get a couple things mixed up with the Indian culture and the Pakistani
Yeah.
culture, but overall, I think she did a great job. I just think it was, you know, the story didn't do her much favors maybe, and then the
Mhm.
way they presented it to the audience, like you said, didn't give her a fair shot
Mhm.
because
Yeah. Yeah. It
people are
was
making
almost
hate videos.
destined to fail.
Yeah, yeah, because people are making hate videos before it comes out, and it's successful on YouTube because it's easy for people to sit behind their computer and just hate. But you know, you gotta if you really do love this art form, you gotta really watch and understand what they're trying to go for, break it down, and you know, give it a fair chance.
Mhm.
Uh, One thing I wanted to hit on, Alan, you've been doing improv and you teach improv, right?
I used to teach improv.
You don't
Uh,
do improv at the National Comedy Theater?
I do improv. I don't teach it as I used to teach it there. A lot of it is the fact that the drive. It's really expensive to drive down there now. I live.
Are you in LA or San Diego?
I'm in Orange County,
Oh, cool.
um, so
Must know a lot of Persian.
yeah. So I'm driving. I'm literally driving 100 miles to do the show, and
What
with
what
gas prices nowadays, it's just not
what is
feasible
it?
to.
$8 out there right now?
No, no. It's
288 here.
yeah. We are at we're just over $5, but it was at 6 before the elections.
Okay. The reason I wanted to bring up the improvs because you actually have a book, right? Called Yes and the Most Overlooked Concept in Improv.
Mhm.
So what is can you give the audience exactly what you wrote this book for and how you kind of fell in love with improv?
Yeah. Well, so I got into improv. I was working on my master's degree back in the early 90s. And long story short, I was in Berkeley doing some research, staying at a friend's house. As I was leaving, his TV was on Comedy Central, and there was the British Whose Line Is It Anyway? And just started watching an episode. It's like, wow, this is really good. And then went home, started recording it. Um, and you know, it was like, I think I could do this. And so I started taking classes, took a lot of classes. In the mid 90s, then I joined a group or two. Um, and and I realized I have a very specific take on improv, not to sound snooty at all, but
What's your take
you
on
know,
it?
what's my take on it? The take on it uh, is what I believe comedy works with comedy is this idea that um, what you should be doing in improv is you should be replicating life as much as possible, reality and life. And I say that because what you want to do is right when your scene starts, you want to connect with your audience. You want to present a situation that your audience has gone through, getting fired, looking for a job, asking someone on a date, getting divorced, getting married, having children. You know, you want scenes to be grounded in reality so your audience can connect with it.
And
And
there's
then
humor,
you have this game on top of it.
yeah, there's humor within that though.
Yeah, well, I'll say this: the now you throw in the improv game. You change emotions. You throw in a line. You do the scene backwards.
Oh,
Once you've connected with the audience and set up a scene that they can relate to, and then you throw this game on top of it, that's where the comedy comes out of it. And so now you've taken a situation, you've brought your audience in, and now you're flipping that situation on its head, and that's where the comedy is right. That stand up works the exact same way.
and you're also
Stand up that's good.
you're also a stand-up comedian, or do you still do stand-up?
I tried it once and it wasn't for me. And to me, it was the writing. The
It's different.
well, of the stand-ups I know, they spend hours, days, weeks on their routines,
But
months,
but dude,
and they work really hard at it.
stand-up and improv, they're both difficult in their own right. And for
Mhm.
me, I'm not much. I tried stand-up once or twice. I did not do well. But I've always loved improv, always loved creating a scene. But when you're dealing with improv, like to finish off that topic real quick,
Yeah,
when you're doing a scene, explain you have to have like a beginning, middle, and end. And if you don't have a realistic foundation, like you were saying,
mhm.
people go over the top with it, obviously. But how do you try to hone somebody in when they're kind of
Yeah.
going over the place?
Well, that's the thing about improv is, yes, there's a beginning, middle, and end, but you don't know what the middle and the end are.
Cool.
All you know is the beginning. And the thing is, what I found is that if you start wacky, if your scene is about an alien landing in wanting to probe a family, um, that's hard to relate to. That's hard to relate to as an audience, because now you know that you know so you're disconnected from that scene, versus if the scene was about me asking someone out on a date, right away the audience right in there, they understand that. And the other thing is your scene partners, it helps them out a lot, because if I go, oh, I'm an alien, I'm going to go probe this family, well, what does your scene partner do? They don't have any context to be able to relate to that, and so now they have to be equally wacky, and you've just kind of destroyed the scene at that point. As opposed to, if I'm asking someone out on a date, my scene partner at least has a perspective of having been asked out or asked out, and now they can portray that, and then we can build a scene on that, a very and as you say, a solid foundation. So once you have that solid beginning, now you can start getting crazy and wacky in the middle, and then to the end.
But dude, that's what's so fun about it, right? So it's like
Mhm.
figuring out a way to bring it home, you
Yeah,
know?
that's the I think that's the biggest attraction to improv, is this idea of walking on a tightrope. You are putting yourself out there without any knowledge of where you're going. And I've seen plenty of bad improv to know that if you don't have a good foundation, not only do you not know where you're going, the audience doesn't know, and that affects their ability to come back. The National Comedy Theater, we have 100-seat theater. We have to fill those 100 seats. We have to entertain people so much so that they have such a good time. They're not only going to come back, but they're going to bring their friends. And if you don't produce a product that is worth coming back for, and risking the reputation in front of your friends, then you're sunk as a theater business.
But there's a parallel with how we just talked about Marvel there.
Mhm.
You got to keep that quality up. You got to keep your
Yeah.
friends coming back.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a momentum that has to be maintained.
I know we don't have you for much longer, but I just want to hit on a few things. But how did you get involved with Film Threat?
Yeah, so I had, the long story short, I found myself in a position where I just wanted to talk and write about movies. And so I just began doing movie reviews. And then this was in the
I want to
podcast.
read your reviews. Go to filmthreat.com. I just read your Weird Al one again. I mean,
Yeah.
Dante wrote one too. You have a great team over there.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, we have a really good team. We're watching a lot of stuff. Um, so I want to get into it. My a good friend of mine from improv, we started a podcast together. And um and from that, I started being able to, so on my website I was able to do some news items, things like that. And I got invited to this Futurama event um, where they were unleashing an app game based on Futurama. And so the big thing that thing was that the cast of Futurama was going to do a table read of an episode. Long story short, met Chris there, told him that I was doing he was looking for reviewers for Film Threat. I said, oh, I review films, sent him my stuff, and then got on board there. And that's kind of how it is. It's pretty much that simple. And if any of your listeners ever want to review films and have experience doing it, we're always looking for people. But and the process really isn't that hard. You just have to be able to write well.
Yeah, that's why I have Grammarly. But I mean, because Film Threat used to be a magazine and then it transitioned to online. So you're basically the head honcho in charge of the whole writing staff, correct? So
yeah, like the website, that's under my domain.
Yeah. So, like Alan said, like I said earlier, I mean, you guys want to submit a film, you want to help out, you can just go to filmthreat.com, contact. Really quick, Alan, when it comes to actually, wanting to make a documentary like Chris is doing, are you a part of that?
No, I'm on the website. Like the Attack of the Doc, the G4 story, that's Chris's.
Okay, so do you want to give a quick shout out for Chris on that? What exactly is
No, I don't want to give a shout out to Chris.
Okay, yeah, Chris.
No. Yeah, I think he would explain it all better himself. But he crowdfunded a documentary. He was on Attack of the Show, and he created a documentary, which I believe there's going to be a screening coming up at LA Comic-Con, and then it'll hit the festival circuit next year, I believe. And if you were a fan of G4 and of Attack of the Show, this is right in your wheelhouse. A lot of nostalgia. He interviews a lot of the behind the scenes people, some of the on-air talent, and it just kind of shows how that show is able to not only be created but to survive for as long as it did, in terms of the way it approached its content, the stories it's told, and to be on a network show like that.
I didn't mean to,
No, yeah, no. Chris and I are always going at it.
You guys are like bros.
Yeah,
dude. So, you said you were. It's award season, Critics' Choice Awards, but also, we kind of touched base on that. But you've been to all these different conventions, D23, Comic-Con. There's a couple other coming up. But you guys do panels and stuff like that. When you're at those panels, what are you trying to get, or what are you guys talking about?
Well, that's all on Chris. So usually I show up and he says, "You're doing this panel," and it's like, okay, and then it's much like Hollywood on the Rocks and the Film Threat Live on Fridays.
It's like a live show.
Yeah, I just show up and I go with it, and I think that's where my improv skills come into play, because I think he has a good idea of what he wants to talk about that day, and I kind of go along with it.
Improv helps you in the real world too. Even taking acting classes, Brando said everybody's acting every moment in their life, so I mean, it kind of helps you think on the feet. And this is the last question. I know you got to run, but we didn't really finish this question. But you said movies are too long, like we talked about at the beginning. I guess you kind of touched base on it, but why do you think films have taken an approach to be so much longer? And is it necessary? Because good movies back in the day were maybe an hour 30. People were worried Thor: Love and Thunder was going to be too short, and people were worried Wakanda Forever is going to be too long. But what's your approach to finding a good balance? Does it just depend on the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk a lot. You have to earn. I'll give you 90 minutes. If your film's 90 minutes, I won't complain. But after that, you've got to earn it. You've got to tell a story so compelling that it's like, I want to know more. I want to see more. I think Tar came pretty close to that. That's another over 2 hour long movie. it was interesting. It was intriguing. As to why, I have a theory, and this is only a theory, but I think the reason movies are 2 hours long is because they're no longer shot in film.
Oh,
It's an expensive process. So with film, you need to create a movie long enough, 90 minutes, but not too long, because then that gets way too expensive.
yeah.
And to shoot on film a 3-hour movie is, there's a huge budget there. But now that everything's digital and that everything could be stored on a hard drive, that cost is not there anymore. And so it has freed up a lot of people to take their time with their story, as opposed to there's nothing forcing a filmmaker to say you've got to come in at 90 minutes, period.
Right.
It's now, well, take all the time you want. And movie theaters, they're not complaining anywhere. They can't complain anymore about the fact that they're going to get fewer screenings on a 2-hour movie than they can with a 90-minute movie.
You also
And
made
so,
a point the other day saying some filmmakers may be a little arrogant to cut their own film. It wasn't arrogant, but you said something of the sort. Is that what do you mean
yeah,
by
I mean, that goes to a bigger issue, and that's the idea for filmmakers to be so full of themselves that they're beyond criticism. And that if you want to make it in Hollywood, if you want to make it in filmmaking, you've got to surround yourself with people who can be honest with you. And you get the sense that maybe people are so, who criticizes Tarantino. But there's only one Tarantino.
yeah.
There's only one Scorsese. And
I mean, hate him or love him, there's one Christopher Nolan. These guys do film, but you made a good point. You got to have people around you that are going to give you the constructive criticism, be honest with you, and that's exactly what you guys do over at Film Threat. If you guys are interested in helping review, or if you want to get your film reviewed by Threat Allen and his whole team, just go to their website, filmthreat.com.
Yeah. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a contact form. That's the best way to get a hold of Chris or myself, is through that contact form. You can submit your film there. You can also, request to get an audition to write. It's all in that contact form.
How did the auditions to write go? Do you have to do a movie? Do you
Yeah. Well, the first thing is I just need samples of what you've written, and by samples I mean could be off your professional work, could be off your personal blog or website, or you could just write up a couple reviews and send them in, because I just want to know that you can write and that you have a perspective on film. And then what I'll do is, it's very hard. If you can write, you'll get past that first step real easy. After that, I'll give you 4 movies to review, and then we'll see how well you do reviewing movies that no one's heard of, and B, it also gives you a flavor of what movies we review, because you're not going to be reviewing big Hollywood studios for a while.
Yeah, but that's the whole
so
channel is in the website. You review indie movies to big movies.
Yeah, and I've had people basically say, "Hey, thanks for letting me see these films, but I'm not really into this." And then it's like, fine, I would much prefer you be honest that way and say, these aren't for you, and then we can move on, and we're not wasting each other's time, And
yeah.
and
I mean, you have a great writer. I mean, you guys have him on the show. Is Dante James fairly new to the team?
He's been around for a while. He doesn't write as much, but he really likes to handle the controversial films, and so
Yeah.
so we'll let him do it.
I got you. Alan, I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. You're a very busy individual, and for you to take the time to speak to us and everyone here at Comic Construct, we really do appreciate you.
Yeah.
I hope one day we can get you back. Maybe I had an idea, maybe marinate on this. You should maybe you talk it over with Chris or anybody, but instead of doing, everyone, maybe the people that can't write, maybe they do videos like this, why not?
Yeah.
Maybe under umbrella under your name, but I'd love to help you out with anything you need, but you're always a friend. If you're ever in Houston, you have a place to stay with me.
Oh,
But dude, what do you got going on? Are you watching any movies tonight?
yeah, seeing the Pale Blue Eye, which is the new Christian Bale movie.
It's
I
out.
know nothing about it, but
Is it a special screening?
yeah, it's a special screening. The I don't know if you've ever wondered, but how does the Golden Globes, why do they nominate movies that haven't gone out in the theaters? Well,
Yeah.
this is how we get a sneak peek at a bunch of these.
And
Um,
real
but
quick,
let me just say that,
yeah.
again, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you being a fan of a Film Thread and our live stream. And so, yeah, it's equally my pleasure to be with you today.
Alan, I appreciate it. Do they give you gift bags at these award shows? And how long, real quick, have you been
Yeah.
going to these, like, not award shows, these early screenings? And how long have you been able to get the access to go to these early screenings?
Yeah, we don't get gift bags. They do.
See, they
They
should.
do send us. They do send us like screeners and stuff. Like I just got a giant stack of movies, and a lot of it is just to remember, for us to remember that their movie came out a couple months ago, and which is always helpful, because then I'm better clear as to what came out. But yeah, and so I've been doing that for 5 years, and again, the movie season ends in December, at the end of December, and so these studios want the publicity that comes with getting nominated, and so that's pretty much why we get the early access.
And
you know
Oscars is 4 months away.
I don't know. I think, is it in March?
Because the slap was like 7 months ago. I saw a video of the slap.
Yeah, but they delayed it because of COVID.
Oh, okay, got you. All right, guys. If you want to follow Alan, you can go to Twitter at mypal at Film Thread on Twitter, Instagram at Film Thread Alan, and on Instagram Film Thread at Film Thread. Alan, I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.